Greetings, mortals, peers, and queers. Welcome to an interesting episode of our Monday show. Today, I am interviewing GWJonesss, a leftist content creator, and I'm going to turn it over to them. We're going to be doing an interview today, and we're going to see how it goes, and hopefully, we will continue interviewing other smaller leftist content creators. With that, I turn it over to my guest. Give us your name and pronouns.
Hey there, everybody. My name is GWJonesss. I go by he, him.
Awesome. So, you're a content creator, but what kind of content creator are you? What is your main platform, and what is the main content you produce?
For the time being, it is TikTok, which would be my main platform, I would say. I have been kind of interested in branching out from that. I took a break from social media for a while. Previously, I had been super involved with pretty much everything social media because of my job and the fact before that I was in a touring band where you kind of have to be a little bit of a slut on the internet to get, any kind of interaction to improve your, statistics. I was signed to like a small label, and there was a lot of pressure with money and paying back loans that caused me to have to really be out there on the internet for a while in a way which was kind of unhealthy, I would say. So after about 2 years of not having literally anything, I came back to TikTok. The reason being that the platform really allows you to interact with people in a way that I feel a lot of other, places don't. It shares your videos out to a random audience. It starts in your local area and then expands from there. And unlike anything else like YouTube or Facebook per se, or even Twitter, I feel it has the chance of virality in your content that you create in a better way. It kind of started just as a void to yell my stuff into to kind of get off my chest. I had followed quite a few leftist people, and I started kind of, seeing a lot more outside of just the regular things I was reading on my own. And it just kind of fell into something that I feel like fit pretty okay into. I'm not super sure how far it will ever go, but it's something that me and my wife even talked with each other about earlier today, of kind of reasoning of what I'm even doing on TikTok. I had a little bit of a mental conundrum this morning of like, what point does this serve? Why am I creating content even? I feel like some of it comes off as performative, and whenever you're on any online form, the term of like keyboard warrior gets thrown around a lot. And so that's just something that, I was like, what's even kind of the point of this? But at the same time, I've had a few meaningful conversations with people that are center or, were claiming to be libertarian or just kind of undecided people. And I was able to walk them through a lot of socialist and communist ideology and just general, I don't know, I want to say humanitarian concepts that really haven't ever been presented to them because of the bubbles that they were in. And so even if it's just, a handful of people that get exposed to ideas that I think are really great, that will be enough for me, honestly, in the end of the day.
All right, that's awesome. So, you're a leftist. What kind of leftist are you, and why?
All right. That's always hard, but I mean, probably the easiest way to explain it would be to call myself an anarcho-communist. Um, the other term that goes along with that is anarcho-syndicalism. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
I
Maybe I'll
think
get
you are.
murdered
I
by
think you
some
are.
of my fellow leftists, but
And what does that
yeah, so
mean
that
to
would be,
you?
yeah. Anarcho-communism kind of meets society's problems, I feel, on two fronts. communism in itself faces the economic side of society, where it strives to put the workers in charge of the means of production, which will create a greater general happiness for people, because when everyone gets to decide on what's happening in their society, more people are just going to be helped. Having just a single person decide those kind of things is generally going to help just the people who are making those decisions. So if we give that over to a populace and the working class, they're going to be able to be helped instead of just the single person who is currently making the decisions under capitalism in any kind of workplace situation. Anarchism comes into that, though, with a bit of making sure we're not falling into a lot of things that communist pushes in the past have fallen into, where it be authoritarianism, dictatorships, and stuff like that. Even though a lot of those things, I think, after I've done quite a bit of research on them, come off as propaganda put forward to try to smear communism and dilute what communism actually is and the progress that was made in communist countries. There is still something to say about how, doing something socialist or communist does sometimes open, a hole for people to fill, and it can cause abuse to happen still. So anarchism, to me, is the theory that any power structure, any authority has the necessity to justify itself. Things like the Civil Rights Act, that, I think, justifies itself. So I, as an anarchist or an anarcho-communist, am not against having the Civil Rights Act being around. I think that's what separates like a libertarian and an anarchist, is that anarchists are realistic and they look at, hey, does this thing actually serve society? And then a true anarchist, in my beliefs, wouldn't destroy something that does serve society and does serve the oppressed. But, things like incarceration, especially how it takes place in America, I believe in abolition. I don't believe incarceration, especially how it's done here, is in any way a reasonable solution to crime and the things that we see happening. It doesn't rehabilitate people, and so it's just one of those things where that's something that I, as an anarchist, would say, hey, this doesn't serve society. We should do stuff to completely either wipe this out or change its system entirely. So that's how those two, I feel, go together, is facing economic oppression and then facing just general authoritarian oppression with one ideology.
That's interesting. So, you've talked about abolition of certain things, and you've talked about the justification of certain power structures. Can you give me some insight? What sort of drew you to leftism? What drew you to anarcho-communism over other breeds of leftism, say socialism, say just straight up communism, etc., etc.?
I think that it is really just the logical progression of many people who are socialists or communists. If any of them think long enough and hard enough, it actually leads them towards anarcho-communism. It just follows along with what is the logical progression of becoming more radicalized once you see these things actually working in real life. So where I would say socialism really encompasses a lot of stuff, because it is the foundation, I guess, of communism. Like, communism is somewhat synonymous in providing for people, which is what socialism is about, is making sure that everyone has what they need. And so I feel like a lot of things that communism has derives from socialism, and then anarcho-communism, steps away from the authoritarian vanguard style of government, and really is the true embodiment of what communists strive towards. Marx talked about that, I believe, and a lot of other communist people, of the necessity, I think it was maybe even Lenin, I might be not well learned in this as much as I would hope I am, but the necessity of having, that vanguard party going out there and taking control of the current government, but then dissolving itself once communism is actually achieved. And so I feel in a lot of instances, I am very happy to work side by side by anyone who just claims to be a straight up communist. I think the anarcho part, every time I explain it to any person who claims to be communist, is like, oh yeah, I'm on board with that. It's just they don't know the terminology of anarcho-communist, or just saying anarcho-communist is just kind of a long word. So it's easier just to say communist or communism.
And you've hit on several different points, and some of the stuff.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. As this is more of like a generalized interview to give the audience a baseline of who you are and what you think. There's a few points like the abolition of prison, or the idea of a vanguard party. I would love to get in conversation with you in future interviews, in future conversations. But I think we've given the audience a baseline understanding of who you are and where you stand. So let's ask you a few deeper questions.
Absolutely.
What do you think of the current state of the United States? Big question, I know.
Man.
We're gonna start talking about less the person and more your thoughts on the world.
Alrighty, so
I can hone that in further if you'd like.
Yeah. I guess just in a general sense, here's my explanation. If I was explaining the United States to just someone who's never been, presented with what is happening in the United States, I don't think there's any human that hasn't been presented with it, unfortunately, at this point. But pretty much a organization of theocratic, quasi-fascist people have taken over much of the government by illegitimate means, and because of this, they are hurling us towards weird quasi-Christian apocalyptic situation where they don't care about the apocalypse, and they think that people on Earth should struggle for like that struggle is a good thing, and it is very theocratically based, and currently that is affecting so many people, with how we see abortion rights being disassembled, how we see LGBTQ rights being disassembled, how we see all the other things that were happening before those things hit the news. Like I mentioned, mass incarceration, like I've also talked about with debt. I don't know if I've talked about that much with here, but medical debt, student loan debt, all those kinds of things. They're ignoring things that society needs to be addressed, and so it's just sliding at this point pretty hard. And capitalism really has nothing in its structure to protect people. So it is getting propped up by capitalism, and just in a general sense, things are bad.
Okay, interesting. Then with that, how do you think the 2022 midterms will go?
That is something that scares me a bit.
Why does it scare
I'm hoping that enough people vote, but at the same time, what's happening now is just precipitation from the actions of the past. all the things that are getting eroded, that happened as soon as Trump got elected. The rise in fascism, the rise in capitalist oppression. I mean, you can look back to Reagan with those things. So it's just, we have to cope with what's going to happen, how we can, and that's when I lean towards my anarchist side of my viewpoints of like mutual aid and stuff like that. But yeah, I really hope Republicans don't get more control. I feel that pressuring Democrats works way better at getting things done. Pressuring Republicans has zero effect. You could yell at Trump till he's blue in the face, he's still going to be a fascist. Same with all of his followers. But a Democrat, there's definite times that it seems to me that enough social pressure actually has an effect on them. So I would prefer a Democrat being in control because I'm going to be able to work with that better. I don't think their general policies towards economics are good.
Can you give the audience an example of Democrats being bullied into a better position by the left?
Trying to think. There's a lot of things that come to mind, and I'm trying to point out one that would be the best of it.
I know you had made a video recently on Biden choosing to drop his plans of endorsing an anti-abortion, what was it, AG or lawyer?
I believe it's actually a judge. I don't know. I know Biden and most of the Democrats right now are pushing towards some pretty centrist or even anti-abortion, like judges, AGs, different things throughout all the states in attempt to find some kind of common ground with Republicans, which is just nuts because Republicans have stopped doing that for a long time. So it's just like, why ever try working with them? The pressure that I've seen, though, mount from leftists in the recent weeks, I think really has pushed Biden towards doing real things. His executive order, although kind of lacking, at the same time is some kind of motion towards improving access to abortion. And yeah, him, abandoning his pick, I believe it was in, oh man, I got to go look at that again. But if you go reference my video on TikTok, there's so many things that have come up. I've kind of just blanked out on it a little bit. But with his abandoning that, some people are claiming other reasons. But if you look at the whole situation, it very much looks like he wanted to save face because of the huge backlash when people found out. I believe it was a Mother Jones reporter that leaked some emails of Biden going back and forth with Mitch McConnell about that. And after that had come out, all of a sudden they were like, oh, Rand Paul wasn't going to agree with this. So because Rand Paul wasn't going to go along with it, he's the one that made it so it wouldn't happen. And I didn't want to do it in the first place, or whatever weird backpedaling that Biden was saying. And so that's something that, although publicly the administration is going to claim other things because they don't want to make it obvious how we can affect them, I really do think there was an actual TV ad that was running against Biden and his push towards centricism and appointing people who were literally anti-abortion while standing up and saying that he is for women's rights. It's just completely nonsense. And so just all the action generally from the left across the board that I saw over the last few weeks, and then seeing that get overturned, regardless of the optics that they try to put out, I really do think that was, a recent thing that we can see that even keyboard warrior action can affect. I think real personal action is much, much more important, but
Okay.
doing even more little things on a computer can be helpful.
with all of that, let me ask you. So, recent reports and polls have come out saying that most of the Democratic Party, or at least Democratic voters, do not want Biden to run in 2024. However, there's still the possibility that he might choose to run. Um, we have signalings from Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump and Greg Abbott that they all want to run, and even Liz Cheney have all signaled that they kind of want to run 2024. So, how do you think, as a leftist, how do you think that the 2024 presidential run will go, and what do you think its significance on America will be?
Ooh. Fortunately, right now, I think there's a little bit of a toss-up. Seeing how the midterms will really tell a little bit on how far things will go with leftist kind of action being able to be implemented. If the Democrats can hold out in the midterms, they have a chance of continuing into that. I really do hope Biden doesn't continue the run. I always hope that centrists just go home and just kind of live their rich lives and they go ignore everyone like they totally can, because it's just like there's no reason for them to be involved at this point. The policies they're making aren't going to affect them or their friends or their families, so it's just like they should kind of just get out of the way. One thing that I think would really affect things in a real way is if the women's rights protests got a bit more serious. The action that I saw nationwide during 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement really did a lot of stuff. And I think, although there was a lot of reports talking about the negative blowback of people getting violent or protests, causing people to look at leftists or, Democrats in a negative way, I think that's actually detached from the people, because it did overturn. We did see a movement back towards the Democrats, and more real action from people gets them prepared to do things like actually go and vote. When you take part in real life action, whether it be mutual aid or functionally shutting down an economic center of a city, or anything that actually helps, it gets you awake to the impact you can have. So you're more ready to move. And when something like voting comes up, you're the ones actually driving people to go vote. You know what I mean? So if more people take part in women's rights things and the women's rights movement gets more aggressive in the ways that they're trying to get their message out, I think Democrats would actually have a better chance at winning, because when people see action from a party that positively impacts their lives, they're more apt to vote for it. The more complicit and peaceful and nice that leftists and Democrats act, the harder of a chance they're going to have at winning elections moving forward, whether that be the 22 midterms here or the 24 presidential elections coming up. Republicans definitely have a chance. It's unfortunate they shouldn't have it, but they do have it, in my opinion, as long as people are being as relaxed as they are.
Okay. Who then, who do you think should run in 2024? I
Oof,
assume you'd be voting Democrat, so which Democrat would you like to see on the ticket?
good Lord. I saw someone argue that AOC would be at the exact point where she would be legal to be president. That would be
She
a
would.
freaking
She
trip.
turns 35 here pretty soon.
Yeah, that was the thing. She would be 35 like a month before the voting, and actually the stipulation would be that she'd be 35 by her inauguration date. Which, because she would be 35 before the actual election would happen, she would also be 35 before the actual inauguration. That would be freaking interesting. Um,
Are you saying you'd like to see
the
AOC on the ticket, or do you think there is another
The
choice?
thing is, I don't know if she's going to be as receptive of that. If that's something that she actually wants to do, that would really be up to her. I haven't seen too much signaling that she would do it. The other person, um, the congresswoman from California, I'm blanking out really hard. I want to say she's the House of Representatives.
Katie Porter?
Yeah, Katie Porter is that 12th district.
I think so.
I don't have a computer in front of me right now. I should have, but Katie Porter, she, I think, is able to walk people through things in the same way that I've seen Bernie do. And she very much does the hard work for transparency in the government and economics and
45th
policies
California
that are being
district.
set. 45th?
45th.
Or 25th? All right.
45th.
So 45th. We'll get it right once.
Yeah.
But yeah, she has done a lot of the work that has aided in things coming out that I have been able to use in my pursuits of radicalizing people towards communism and socialism. So even though she's a Democrat and for sure will have to support some kind of capitalistic things to become a president, I don't know how realistic, unfortunately, it is for someone to be completely anti-capitalist and become the president of the United States. It's getting closer and closer to the day where maybe we might see that if you look at polls of the younger generation and how they would be willing to vote for a real socialist and things towards that manner that are really
Yeah,
pushing
hasn't the
towards
data come out showing that
capitalism.
Gen Z is like the most progressive generation of them all?
It's unbelievably so. And so that's just one of those things that in our lifetimes we'll probably see a socialist president if the United States doesn't just literally turn into Handmaid's Tale, which it could. So,
I actually haven't seen
but
The
if we can,
Handmaid's Tale. I really need to get on that.
honestly, it's good.
All right.
It's the book is a good read, but it's easier to digest. I want to say with the show.
Okay, so we've run around
Yeah.
this point a little bit. What is the left's position on Democrats? Are they friend? Are they foe? Are they something more? What do you think of the Democrats and their relation to the left?
I see the Democrats as a way to pick the enemy I want to fight. I figure, because of everything that I've witnessed in my life, almost 30 years now, that I'm going to have to be active um, in my community and with voting and everything if I ever want people to have a better life. And so going against democratic policies to push them more left, and like I mentioned before, how it's much more reasonable to push a Democrat around versus a Republican. If the option is offered to vote for a Democrat and beat a Republican out, that's great. If there's an area, say like California, that can aid a third party socialist to get enough votes, like if it ever gets to a point where that 5% threshold for federal funding, is close, and it's not going to cause a fascist to become president, for sure, you should actually, as a leftist, vote third party.
Oh,
Getting,
interesting.
yeah,
You're in favor of third parties?
I would say, yeah, in instances. Whenever, like I said, the opportunity arises to vote third party when you're in a strong Democratic area, every leftist very much should. And not just left Democrats like Bernie. Like, you should find, I mean, a coalition should form around some kind of leftist candidate. I feel like the left is so splintered these days, but like Howie Hawkins, the last election, that
Would you
was the
like to
most viable
see?
leftist
Would you
situation, I
like to see
think, was the Green
organizations
Party.
like the DSA or the Democratic Socialist Association to become real political parties on par with the Democrats and the Republicans?
Ideally, that would be cool. I'm thinking more of in terms that, like, we get some of their members elected in the House of Representatives. My argument for that is we have people literally in the House of Representatives blaming Jewish space lasers for the fires in my in my state here. So if those people can get elected, I think we could get some straight up DSA people elected in the same manner. Bernie continuously gets reelected under an independent in the Senate, even, but he started in the House of Representatives as well. That's the start of it. I think pursuing presidency is kind of just like a okay, for sure, that would be cool, but outside of pursuing that 5% mark of votes to attain federal funding, outside of that, I think the huge focus should be towards the legislator and specifically the House of Representatives, and possibly trying to get a DSA member into the House of Representatives to start having a larger platform. And that could be the path to ending the two-party system.
Maybe, maybe. So, what do you say to excuse me? What do you say to like the Bernie or bust crowd or the voting is useless crowd? People who feel so disenfranchised um, from the two party system and feel like it doesn't represent them enough. Um, what do you say to those people? What do you say to the Bernie or busters? It's either this candidate or I don't vote at all type people.
Well, you better be taking part in mutual aid every fucking day. And if you're not going to vote, what are you doing this week to feed the homeless in your area? What are you doing this week to, protest against any kind of fascist movement in your city council? What are you doing this week, to defund the cops? What are you doing this week for bail funds? What are you doing this week for, facing down student loan debt for people or facing down medical debt? I think if someone isn't going to vote, they better be doing something else, and they better be doing it frequently.
Yeah, so you want people to not just virtue signal their positions online. You want them to back it up with boots on the ground.
Correct. Where I think it's important personally to vote, I vote, and I, like I said, proclaim myself to be an anarcho-communist. So as much as some leftists who are really hardline will be like, it's just kind of useless and nonsense, well, sure. But unless you have something you are doing that's more important, that's really having an impact, the day that voting comes around, you might as well just go and vote, man. You know what I mean? It's like you might as well try to do some kind of harm reduction. It's the reason why they have ashtrays in airplane bathrooms. It's not so that people should smoke in the bathroom of the airplane. It's so that when people inevitably do smoke, it doesn't catch the whole fucking plane on fire from them throwing a cigarette in the trash. So that's how I see voting for a Democrat. It's like, if you don't want the whole plane to catch on fire from some idiot throwing a cigarette in the trash, probably we should have an ashtray. But if, you want to be focused on something else and doing something that's meaningful and literally saving someone's life, either financially or physically, and that's what you're actually physically doing during the time period that you could also be voting. And also, voting is huge. You can do mail-in votes. It's beautiful out here. I registered to vote. I just got all my stuff in the mail. Like, for the primaries here, we just got stuff that, like, I didn't go anywhere. I just got something in the mail, and it took me all of, like, 10 minutes. I do, so much dumb stuff with my free time that it's like, just freaking vote. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things. But Yeah, that's my position, I guess, is
Okay.
like, if
Then
someone's going to be there saying that they're not going to vote, they better be figuring out something that's far more important to do the entire time that they could be voting.
okay, then let me ask you, what do you think are the major obstacles for the left in achieving their collective goals?
Um, I'd say that uh, the continued I'm trying to think of the word for this, but delusion. There we go. The continued delusion that we're going to get some Republicans and undecided people in the middle with a centrist Democrat. They need to just drop that. That is the death of their party. Um, with a lot of examples, precisely how we saw Bernie outperform Trump in the polls as a leftist, and we saw Bernie outperform Hillary with his right wing and independent votes. That's a huge tell that going for these centrist Democrats isn't going to win over the left, and it's not going to win over the right. It's just dumb, and they're going to keep shooting themselves in the foot as long as the leaders of that party keep going for centrists. Nancy Pelosi is doing this. Kamala Harris is doing this. Joe Biden's doing this. Hillary Clinton did this. Literally everyone who's ever had power in the Democratic Party in the last freaking, 12 years has pushed for centrists. And their thing is, it's realistic. We'll get people from the right. That's all the reasons I've ever heard. If someone else has a better reason or statistics, I would be happy to listen to them. But everything that I've ever seen shows that leftist, democratic socialist politics actually sway people from the right because they're part of the working class. Democrats don't seem to offer much in real substance, especially centrist ones, but people like Bernie offer things that a steel worker from Alabama actually could jive with. You know what I mean? It's
Okay,
like the things
so
that the
you
people
think
who
that the
regularly
left has
would
a
vote
broader
Republican
appeal?
might actually switch. Oh, sorry, was that?
You think the left has a broader appeal than any centrist Democrat?
I would say so, or at least a democratic socialist. Maybe a far communist wouldn't have as much of an appeal just because of people's disillusion with communism, because of the endless propaganda fight that has been done against it. So, because of people's misunderstandings, unfortunately, I don't know how viable a communist person would ever be, but definitely a very left leaning Democrat for sure, like Bernie, or I mean, he technically is an independent, but Democratic Socialist has a large reach, and that's just based up by poll numbers. That's based up by Gallup. That's based up by Quinnipiac. That's based up by all the big boys in the polling game. They just say that's the truth, and so if Democrats want right wing people, they should start looking at math instead of what feels right. And I don't think it's what feels like. I don't think Democrats do stuff because it's right or wrong. It's money motivated. It's always money motivated. It's just like one of those things where thinking they do anything because it's the right thing to do is nuts. And so I think that getting that kind of democratic socialist push is the best hope we have and is the most realistic thing in continuing Democrats having power.
Okay. What do you say to. Actually, no, I'll go with a different question. What are the greatest strengths of the left? What draws people in? What is so appealing about the left?
I think the left lures people over because it plays on the basic human instinct of self-preservation from communal preservation.
Can you expound upon
Although
that?
yeah, although the opposing theories on people all being selfish, largely propagated by Christian theocratic people, um, they, and people being innately evil. Um, I think that's just not proven to be true. I think once someone has enough psyops and propaganda done against them, they're bound to get really corrupted and have these really weird instincts instilled into them. But the real biological piece within us from, those millions and billions of years of evolution, we survived because we took care of each other. Humans don't just do stuff on their own. That's not how it was. And so leftism actually brings us back to that piece of ourselves, where deep down we all know that that's the way that works best. And if you can strip away the indoctrination of a capitalist society, it becomes more and more clear that that's the case. So I think that's the biggest strength the left has, is just we are humans. As corny as that sounds, it really, at least for me, rings true.
Okay. Then let's turn that to, what do you think the left could be doing better right now?
I
What do you
think the
think are some
most
of the
important thing the
weaknesses of
left,
the left that they
yeah,
could be improving upon?
real action, man. Oh man, it's just sad. In my job, and what I do in my free time with coding is, I'm kind of stuck where I'm at financially. I'm not doing the best. At the same time, I'm doing okay though, like where I'm able to survive. But back when I was a manager of a cell phone store, I had a lot more mobility and was able to actually do real action. I'm trying to achieve that again. I'm going back to school for coding, so I'm hoping to gain some kind of financial power so that I can start mobilizing more myself and helping others to mobilize. Um, but what I can do now, I mean, with my current financial situation and everything, is unfortunately doing a lot of stuff online. But the beautiful thing with coding is you can actually do a lot online with that. It's not just sending one email, it's sending thousands of emails, it's sending thousands of contacts, it's inundating people in power to the point where their websites and contact forms are just going to be either useless to them or they're going to have to listen to what's happening. And so they get to decide if they're going to be wasting money or listen to people. Is kind of what I'm attempting in my own way to achieve. So I guess more action, more real life action, more mutual aid, just everything should be done to work towards what can you do today and try to find something new every day or something to continue to work on every day, towards helping people in your community. And I think the best thing to look at for any leftist is city board. Check out your city board. Find the Nazis there. Like, there's that is huge effect on your community. And as a leftist, you can either run for city board or you can make city board meetings go terribly for the city board. And if you act in a group, you can really shut that stuff down. And that, I guess, would be my best suggestion of a first step, but just general action. There needs to be more of it, and less theory, more real life stuff.
All right,
That is
interesting.
awesome. Now, why won't you debate me?
I'm going to mute you.
No worries.
Okay, he's muted. Don't interrupt me when I am conducting an interview. All right. I have a question for you. Do you... no, I'll go with... What do you say to people who may be on the fence? Politically speaking. Maybe don't want to make the jump to voting for leftist candidates. Maybe they don't want to vote for Democrat candidates. What do you say to people who might be middling on the fence?
I think the first thing that I do whenever I try to talk someone into switching over is try to get involved in their life and to demonstrate. So it's a lot less words, it's more demonstration. I think that has a lot more of an impact on people for converting them. So I think that, I mean, just speaking in a general sense, it's hard to switch anyone over with any kind of argument outside of things that are going to physically help them. So probably first listening to them and figuring out what problems they have is a good first step for me or any leftist to take. And then offer the solutions and show how realistic those solutions are without bringing up leftist ideas or terms that have been demonized from propaganda. So whether that be someone at a job who's kind of like a centrist or whatever, just talking about how it sucks that we don't get paid enough, and bringing up, oh man, it's crazy to think that unions on average, people get paid 11 to 13% more from just being in a union, and like that would be nuts. Like finding the exact amount of money, making it personable.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this I got from my extent of being a salesman. When I was done being in a touring band, I kind of got burned out from doing that, and I got a job in a cell phone store. And I went through an incredible amount of sales training with that, to the extent where I started actually giving sales trainings towards people. I was leading conference calls of 400 to 500 people of our company, explaining sales tactics and how to, all the new things are coming from these different companies that we were partners with. And the things that I learned work the best in sales also work the best in politics often, and convincing people on a personal basis, where you got to make it personal. You got to have some stories that are real, and you got to be genuine about it. Making up stories, people will figure that out. You got to find something in your life that you can actually tell a story about, and you got to listen to them. Listening to people is the biggest thing you can do to change their mind, because that is the least frequent thing that's done, and it makes people notice.
Okay.
And makes people actually want to reciprocate and listen to what you have to say.
Expanding upon that, what would you say to your average Republican voter? What do you say to the average Republican who maybe voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and they've sort of watched the January 6th committee hearings, and now they're not really sure where they stand anymore. What do you say to the average Republican voter who might not be a hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool MAGA supporter, but might be just, someone who's never voted Democrat before? What do you say to them?
I guess I would start with just a bunch of questions for them of what led them to support Trump in the first place. And I would work at deconstructing those. Things I've heard in the past that people thought Trump was good at was business. He's bankrupted so many times. He makes business of not paying people. I would bring up, imagine if you worked for Trump, you did a job for him, and he owed you like $40,000, and then he just didn't pay you. Like, do you think that's good business? Like, banks don't give him loans because he's defrauded so much shit. Like, literally, he struggles to find loans. And this is accredited. It's not just shit I'm making up. I can point to all the sources for these things I'm saying. And so that's the first way to start switching over a Republican, is to ask them what they actually found that was nice about Trump, and then walk them through stuff that shows that that's not correct. And so that's the first step. Another thing that I find really huge in convincing Republicans is I have a background in theology from my upbringing. And it is really easy to convince most Republicans to support democratic things or socialistic things by just pointing out the direct things that the Bible says Jesus said. And I can walk through the Bible and theology with any Republican so strongly. And I think that might be another thing that leftists can do a bit better, is the right is very theocratic. Being really mad about Christianity, I think, is a very easy thing to do. Hating theology is a really easy thing to do. And I think it's right. But at the same time, is it practical? Maybe spending time to read the entire Bible so you can have context, and realizing that it's a terribly translated text that is pretty much just a historical or attempt to be an historical document that's the genealogy of a guy who ended up saying a bunch of things all about loving everyone and taking care of people and feeding, the hungry and healing the sick and, taking care of people and not focusing on their downfalls, but focusing how you can help them instead of how they can help themselves, and serving others. So I always kind of fall back on almost convincing Republicans to take part in mutual aid because of their Christian roots, because it's what their own theology commands of them. So I'll do an appeal to a higher power to them, I guess. Whereas that religion has been used to radicalize them to the right, I think it equally has power to radicalize them to the left if someone is knowledgeable enough on it and they treat it in a respectful way. That's my sneaky thing, is I can talk to these people in a churchy way because I was grown up in that kind of sense, where a lot of my atheist friends and super hard leftists really distance themselves from the church, and you can kind of hear the anger and stuff. So when they reply to Republicans, they instantly are taken aback and they don't listen to what people are saying. But if they take more of a cordial approach and a kind of calm approach and sneaky approach to showing them how the theology actually points the complete opposite direction of what they've been indoctrinated to, that actually serves a huge thing in moving people from the right towards the left, because it's what caused them. It's like finding the root of what caused them to be righty, and then it's uprooting that, you know what I mean, and using something that was previously effective towards them again, because if they are righty because of theology, that clearly works. So let's use what works and use it as much to our advantage. Use anything we can to our advantage. Don't discount things just because they're crazy and dumb.
Okay.
It's sometimes good to use everything in our arsenal, even if it's something that we don't completely agree with ourselves. Because I definitely don't subscribe to the structure of Christianity and how Christianity is and churches in a very general sense. I'm very opposed to. If these people were serious about doing any of the things Jesus told them to do, they would not be spending any money on a fucking building to meet in. So it's just
Okay, so going off of
one of those
the
things.
going
But
off of
anyway,
the you know, how do I put this? Um, Going off of the sort of doing what you can to meet people where they're at. What do you think is the best way for the left to achieve its aims, to achieve its goals? Do you think it is all of the left becoming, avid Bible readers and speaking to conservative Christians in a language they might be very familiar with? Or do you think it's emphasizing labor power and labor aims or do you think it's something intersectional and multifaceted? Give me your thoughts.
I think that is, interfaceted for sure, where the first questions is to find what radicalized them or pushed them to the right in the first place, whether that was theology, then using a theological approach. If it was economics, then using an economic approach of workers' rights. And so using what works is always my best advice. And I think that not being one-sided in that is really important for all leftists because of how easy it's easy to focus on workers' rights, but it's a disconnect for people who are Republicans because of abortion. You know what I mean? So it's like you could talk about workers' rights all you want to some pro-life person, but they're never going to understand that. You know, I mean, it's never going to click for them because nothing literally matters on earth because they've been so indoctrinated about abortion that literally, like, I think theology in that instance is really the only thing to go with, is to show how much more that's pointing towards the left than the right. So, but yeah, so really both. I wish I could just be like one or the other, but really both.
No, that's great. And look, we're almost out of time here, so I'll ask you one final question, then we'll do closing statements.
No problem.
Do you fear a rise in fascism in the U.S.? We've sort of touched on this a little bit in other questions, but I sort of wanted to bring it to a head here.
I wouldn't say I fear it. I am currently fighting it, and I expect their future movement. I'm not scared of fascists. I think their ideas are dumb. I am going to do everything I can physically do to oppose them in my life. So I'm not scared of them. It's happening. It's already happening. It's been happening. And I'm going to continue to expect their next movement and do everything I can to thwart it if I can.
All right, awesome. And with that, I'll go ahead and close out the interview. You want to give us any final thoughts, closing statements, and then go ahead and shut yourself out towards the end.
Absolutely. Again, my name is GWJonesss. You can definitely check out my TikTok. It's GW Jones and then 3 S's at the end instead of just one. Not a particular reason. It's just a username that turned up not to be taken on literally every platform when I started making new usernames. And so it's kind of my initials with my last name, and then I just continued that.
All right.
That has a lot of my thoughts on it. It's a good way of getting a hold of me. If you follow me and comment on stuff, I'll follow you back, and we can message if you have any things you want to talk about. But yeah, I think anarcho-communism is a great thing, and if anyone sits and listens long enough, I'm pretty sure I can convince them, as long as they're not just trying to be a troll. If they're there in good faith, I think there's a good good thing to say that that's probably the best course of action for our society, and whatever we can do in moving towards that is our best hope for human existence.
All right, wonderful. And I'll just say one thing to the chat. I'm very proud to say that me and JW are mutuals on TikTok. Very nice. And I hope you've all enjoyed this interview. I hope it gave you a sort of informative view on this particular leftist and their particular thoughts on the general state of the United States. I hope to record interviews in the future with not only JW or GW, but also other leftists going forward. I post these videos every Monday, and I make smaller videos every day. And with that, I will bid you all adieu. Thank you for watching. It was a wonderful interview. I'm going to thank my guest one final time. Thank you for coming on. I much appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right. And with there, I'm going to end the episode. Goodbye, y'all.